right, and we're still on Abraham Maslow, but what I'd really like to do now is I found an example I want to play you of a peak experience, somebody experiencing a peak experience, because it's one thing to hear about it in lecture or to read about it in a text, and it's another thing to actually see this happening. And this is one of my favorite examples. Naja Salerno-Sonnenberg. Anybody recognize that name out there in our web audience? Hey. Naja Salerno-Sonnenberg was a classical violinist, and she really was pretty well known because of the fact that she was playing solos, so going around to different orchestras and being on this circuit, playing solo with them at a very young age. For a violinist, she was, very young age to be working at that level. So at the time that this interview was done, she was 25 years old, I believe. And understand that the things that really amazed us about her at the time were not, shall we say, it wasn't, the level that she had reached was not that unusual for somebody who was older. So it wasn't really where she was, it was where she was going to be. So we were, violinists, classical violinists don't usually reach their prime until their 40s or 50s or 60s, and here she is. Look at where she is at this age. And so it made everybody wonder, where's she going to be? My God, where's she going to be? When we talk about, like, when she hits 40 and 50, and where is she going to be when she hits 60? It was really incredible. Another thing that really kind of made people talk about her a lot, was she was super unconventional. So usually when you have your classical musicians come from more affluent families, kind of a highbrow society, and yet she practically came off the streets. I mean, here's this woman who has not let go of her Marlboro cigarettes or playing pool, and you'll get a good picture of her personality too when you watch this video that we're going to watch now.
Salerno-Sonnenberg just might become the first. They say might because violin soloists often reach their prime in their 40s or 50s or even 60s. Naja's just 25. What she may lack in celebrity, she makes up for in intensity. She is Pete Rose with a fiddle. Critics have described her talent as awesome, even frightening. But that's not all they talk about. There's that picture of the 1977 New York Yankees enshrined in her violin case. The camel filters never far from the sheet music. The tag sale fashion and the don't give a damn walk. There's the beer, the bourbon, and the billiards. And then there's that face. A face which mirrors the emotion of every note, every phrase, turning a mere performance into a kind of personal exorcism.
I get good reviews for my playing. And in addition, they go, she acts really weird, but she's a valid artist.
Really weird doesn't somehow seem to apply.
She acts unconventional.
Uh-huh.
That's the whole thing. It's unconventional.
So what do they want to do? Kind of make you sort of Liza Doolittle view?
Yeah, I think so. I feel possessed sometimes when I play. And I don't know what my right cheek is doing. I have really more important things to think about.
You feel possessed?
Yeah. sometimes in certain pieces, I cannot believe that this guy thought up this theme. Unbelievable.
For example?
Brahms Concerto. Now that's an intense piece. There are certain passages here and there in that piece that are like, you know, God must have approved it. It's unbelievable. And sometimes I start shaking, and sometimes I get all teary, and then my mascara runs down the ear, and it looks great. If I could find somebody I loved as much as I love that piece.
All right. If she could find somebody she could love as much as she loved that piece. What a great quote of hers there. I have a kind of a sad story to tell you about what happened to Naja Salerno-Sonnenberg about a year to 2 years after this interview was done. She had another hobby that she loved, which was culinary art. And she had a bunch of people over, and she was cooking a dinner, and she accidentally slipped while slicing food in the kitchen and cut off the first digit of her left-hand pinky finger. Okay? And although that ended her career as it was at the time, she has currently succeeded in teaching herself to play the frets of the violin with 4 fingers. So she's still recording some pretty amazing recordings. You can buy her CDs or download some of her music on the internet. Just look up Naja Salerno-Sonnenberg, and their name spelling is on top there. Okay. So Abraham Maslow was also really well known for his Eutychian management theory. Let's look at Eutychian, sometimes called Eutychian, both of them are correct. Okay. Management theory. And this is an application of his theory of the higher needs, okay, brought into the workplace. And what he really encouraged companies was to reorganize in a way that they would satisfy people's higher needs. So there's a lot of ways of doing this. And one thing is to structure jobs so that people have the opportunity to learn and develop their self-worth and their pride and earn respect. Okay? And so if you've organized the jobs so that people can work up to their highest potential, so that they can work their way up in the company, right? And also to give opportunity for creative input, to encourage creative growth. So give opportunity to all people at all levels for creative input, and to foster a sense of belongingness among coworkers. You know, sometimes people do the opposite. Companies do the opposite, and people are not encouraged to socialize or talk together. And he said that, you know, if you structure a company in a way that it is most likely to help meet people's needs no matter where they are on that ladder, help them to move up, they're going to be much happier. There's going to be less turnaround in employees. And anyone who knows anything about running a business knows that turnaround in employees is actually a very expensive thing. He also talked about how if you get to know the people who are working under you, you could figure out which rung of the ladder they're at on those hierarchy of needs. Where are they at? You can structure their incentives in a way that will meet their most prominent needs. Okay? So I want you to think about that. Let's take a look at some possible incentives here. What about a plaque like this? Which need would that help somebody to satisfy? And if you thought esteem needs, you are correct. All right. How about this one? Think carefully about this. Okay? This is more those 2 lower needs, right? Physiological and safety. At least, you know, until you feel secure that your home will be paid off. That you feel that you know that for sure. Okay? that is going to be a raise, for instance, is going to be the greatest incentive. What about this one? What about catering food in at lunchtime? What might that possibly do? That might help people meet their social needs, right? Instead of, oh, eating over your work and over your computer keyboard, as I often do, and our tech people can say, you know, they pulled crumbs out of the keyboard. So to encourage people, this certainly would encourage me if there were catered food brought in. I'd be the first one there. And it would be a great chance to socialize with my great colleagues here. How about this one? A corner window office. Okay? And if you guessed esteem needs, you are correct. This is, as far as business, you know, one of the great symbols of success. Okay? What about this one? What about if your employer paid a percentage of your tuition in these night classes, or say they send you to an educational, pay your way to go to an educational conference? Okay? Cognitive needs, yeah. And what about this one? You know, oftentimes companies, for instance, will have a sales competition, and at the end of the season, you know, they'll have an event, and they might give away, for instance, to the winner these tickets. And you might guess correctly, you guessed aesthetic needs. What about this one? What about a raise to a promotion in title? Not necessarily in pay, but in title. Okay? So that would be esteem needs. And what about a trophy? Again, right? It's an esteem need. And something interesting, let's go back to this trophy one a minute here. If this was earned as a group or given as a group, it promotes bonding with employees. So you might say it could also serve a social need. And then what about the company party? Okay, social needs, absolutely. So creating a sense of belonging.